The city at night was a different world. Neon lights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the slick streets. The hum of distant traffic mingled with the occasional shout or laugh. For the Thomas family, it was just another Friday night, but this one would be different. Evan Thomas was a journalist for the city paper, a man driven by his need to uncover the truth. His wife Clara was a nurse, her heart full of compassion but hardened by years in the ER. Their son, Ben, was only 9, a curious child with a love for adventure. The Thomases had moved to the city for better opportunities, unaware of the darkness lurking beneath its surface. It started with a missing persons report. Evan had been assigned to cover a series of disappearances. Young adults, mostly women, vanishing without a trace. The police had no leads, but rumors of a creature lurking in the city's alleys began to circulate. Evan, ever the skeptic, dismissed them as urban legends. That was until the night he encountered it himself. Evan had been out late, following a lead on the latest disappearance. Clara had insisted he be home by midnight, but as the clock struck 1, he was still wandering the dimly lit streets. His phone buzzed with a message from Clara. "Where are you? Ben's having nightmares again." Guilt tugged at him, and he turned to head home. As he passed a particularly dark alley, he heard it, a low guttural growl. He stopped, heart pounding, and peered into the darkness. At first he saw nothing. Then a pair of eyes, glowing a sickly yellow, stared back at him. The creature was like nothing he had ever seen. It stood on 2 legs, but moved with a fluidity that was unnerving. Its body was covered in matted fur, and its face was twisted into a grotesque semblance of a human. Evan stumbled back, fumbling for his phone to take a picture, but the creature was too fast. It lunged at him, and he barely managed to avoid its claws. He ran, not stopping until he reached the safety of a well-lit street. Breathless, he glanced back but saw nothing. The city had swallowed the monster back into its depths. He rushed home, his mind racing. Clara met him at the door, worry etched on her face. "What happened?" she asked, but he shook his head, not wanting to frighten her. Instead, he kissed her and went to check on Ben, who was tossing and turning in his sleep, mumbling about monsters. The next day, Evan couldn't shake the image of the creature. He decided to investigate further, convinced now that there was something more to the disappearances. He spent hours poring over old records, looking for any mention of similar sightings. To his surprise, he found references dating back decades. The descriptions varied, but the essence was the same: a wraith-like creature haunting the city streets at night. As he dug deeper, he uncovered a chilling pattern. The creature seemed to appear every 20 years, coinciding with a spike in missing persons cases. The last wave had been in the 1980s. It was due again. That night, Evan told Clara everything. At first, she was skeptical, but his fear was palpable. She agreed to help him, and they devised a plan. If the creature was responsible for the disappearances, they needed to find a way to stop it before more people went missing. They decided to set a trap. Clara used her connections at the hospital to obtain tranquilizers, while Evan gathered supplies. They planned to lure the creature out and sedate it, hoping to capture it alive and expose the truth. As night fell, they left Ben with a neighbor and headed into the city. They chose an alley near the latest disappearance, setting up their trap with bait, a mannequin dressed in clothes meant to attract the creature's attention. Then, they waited. Hours passed, the tension mounting with every minute. Just when they were about to give up, they heard it. The same growl Evan had heard before. The creature emerged from the shadows, eyes glowing, teeth bared. It moved toward the bait, and Clara readied the tranquilizer gun. But something went wrong. The creature sensed the trap and turned, locking eyes with Evan. It let out a deafening roar and lunged at him. Clara fired, but the shot missed. Evan scrambled to his feet, grabbing a pipe to defend himself, but the creature was too strong. It pinned him to the ground, its breath hot and rancid. Clara screamed, firing again and again until the creature finally slumped, the tranquilizers taking effect. They had done it. They had captured the Wraith. But their victory was short-lived. As they stood over the creature, its body began to dissolve, turning into a thick black smoke. It swirled around them, filling the alley with an acrid stench. Clara choked, trying to cover her mouth, but it was too late. The smoke enveloped her, and she collapsed, unconscious. Evan struggled to breathe, his vision fading. He managed to drag Clara out of the alley, but by the time he reached the street, she was unresponsive. Panic set in as he called for help. Paramedics arrived, rushing Clara to the hospital. Evan stayed by her side, praying she would wake up. Hours passed, and Clara finally stirred. She was weak but alive. The doctors had no explanation for her condition, but she seemed to be recovering. Evan was relieved, but a nagging fear remained. The creature was gone, but its presence lingered. Over the next few days, things seemed to return to normal. Clara was discharged, and life went on, but Evan couldn't shake the feeling that they had only delayed the inevitable. He continued to research, looking for any clue that might explain what had happened. Then one night, Ben woke up screaming. Evan and Claire rushed to his room, finding him pale and trembling. "It's here," he whispered. "The monster is here." Evan's blood ran cold. He checked the locks and windows, but everything was secure. He tried to reassure Ben, but deep down, he knew his son was right. The Wraith had returned. That night, Evan kept watch, the hours dragging by. Just before dawn, he heard it, a faint scratching at the window. He turned to see the creature, its eyes glowing, staring at him. It was not alone. Behind it, shadows moved, more creatures emerging from the darkness. The city was no longer safe. The Wraiths were multiplying, and there was no stopping them. Evan realized with a sinking heart that they had only uncovered the beginning of a much larger nightmare. As the sun rose, he gathered his family. They had to leave the city, find somewhere safe, but as they packed, Evan knew that safety was an illusion. The Wraiths would follow them, their hunger insatiable. They drove out of the city, the skyline disappearing in the rearview mirror. Ben sat in the back seat, clutching his mother's hand. Clara looked at Evan, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "We'll find a way," she said softly. "We have to." Evan nodded, gripping the steering wheel, but as they sped down the highway, he couldn't shake the feeling that the Wraiths were already one step ahead, waiting for their next move. And so the Thomas family's journey into the unknown began, with the shadows of the city trailing close behind, whispering promises of terror yet to come.